Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, Can-Am Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. And this is a missing persons segment. And we've got Huck in the house. She's doing good. And she's going to be here monitoring and making sure everyone stays peaceful and quiet. It's still broiling hot here in Montana. And Great Pyrenees like Huck don't do real well in the heat. And she's shed a lot in the last month. And she's still shedding a lot, but she needs to get rid of that coat and be a lot more comfortable. And we're helping her by giving her wash downs and making her feel comfortable and brushing her all the time. That's one thing with Pyrenees. They shed a lot, but a great demeanor of a dog. I mean, lots of fun. So, let's get on with the segment. First of all, a lot of you have probably read this under the comments of the different videos I posted. But some idiot, fool, has been taking our Can-Am Missing logo, put it on his website, and is making comments trying to encourage you to go to his WhatsApp site. Don't do it. If I want you to do something special, if I want you to maybe look at something, I'll put it in a pinned comment at the top of the video. Pinned comment is the #1 comment at the top of each video. So always read that comment, because that usually has important information. So I'm going to give you a little insight on something. For the last 3 years, I've been working on a project. Huge project. And in the last 3 years, I've been contacted by various producers from miscellaneous cable shows. And as you know, I've turned down 99% of the invites. I do have a show coming up in October that I did, that as we get closer and I get a date, I'm going to tell you where it is and what I'm on. No, it's not Skinwalker Ranch, but it is a very highly credible show. And I'm interested to see how it turned out. I trust the producers very much, and that's why I did it. Now, the shows I have been invited to do by these various production companies, very sketchy. You're going to notice that a lot of people do the same sort of shows time after time. You see their faces time after time. Friends, none of these people have ever done any research. They're what I call talking heads. Might be the nicest people in the world, but they've never done anything. They're just faces you recognize, and so they get booked to say something that the producers want them to say. If they don't say it, they don't get booked. So essentially, they're saying things just to make money. It's embarrassing. But I've been invited to do that many times. And other topics have tried to get that missing 411 into their arena so that their topic looks credible. And I realize that, and I'm not going there. Which has forced me to look hard at just doing my own work, like I made the first 2 movies. And many of you have asked, well, Dave, why don't you do a 3rd movie? And I have explained to you that making a movie is one of the biggest projects you'll ever undertake in your life. You're dealing with people most you don't know, because you have to contract out the special effects. You have to contract out the sound enhancement, the color enhancement. And then you just pray that those people do a good job for you. And it's scary. It's a very scary proposition, because along the way, it takes 1,000 people to put their hands on a movie to eventually get it done. Very, very scary proposition, because I have to put up more money than I ever spent on my first house to get a movie done. That's how much it is. So, but I have been working on a project. I'll be giving you more info as we move along here. It's pretty exciting. And I'm really proud of where we're going with this. But this show that you're going to see about missing people, and it has a couple of cases, actually 4 cases in here, and you're going to see why those 4 are here. But first of all, the first letter I want to read you, I am very careful not to read preachy letters about religion because I know it turns some people off. It doesn't turn me off, but I don't want to lose part of the audience because they're getting preached to. But this first letter may seem a little preachy at the beginning, but I just ask you to hang in there a little bit, okay? Please. So Dave, we are writing, my wife and I, this letter to share with you our sadness with the loss of your dear son, Ben. We have watched you for many years and always liked the empathy you showed for the parents of missing children. Your pouring your heart out over Ben immediately reminded us of our shortest Bible scripture ever written 2,000 years ago in John chapter 11:35 that says, Jesus wept. Jesus, when seeing his good friend Lazarus' 2 sisters weeping, was moved with emotion, and it says he wept and groaned internally. You mentioned recently how men in society are taught to be macho and internalize everything. Jesus, the most powerful person in the universe, did not do that. The ultimate example for all spiritually strong men. The Bible states that Jesus resurrected 3 people. First Lazarus, next a young boy, and then a little girl. The Apostle Paul resurrected a young man, and he himself was resurrected after being stoned to death. The Apostle Peter resurrected as a kindly woman named Dorcas, showing that God remembers the good things we do, as with Ben helping you on your campaign to help others. The prophets Elijah and Elisha both raised a total of 3 people. 2 were sons of widows, showing God's compassion so that the total resurrections are 9, which includes the resurrection of Jesus by God himself. And all of that is just a foregleam of what will happen with Ben. We share empathy with you and the things below we have been through that may help you. Our good friend's son, we paid to mow our lawn every week. He was bipolar and 18. One day he walked 52 miles and jumped off the Brooklyn Bridge. He survived, injured his back, but walked again. He's still alive. He worked with his father and grandfather, who were steel beam workers, high up on the open beams of the World Trade Center and Empire State Building. Perhaps his lack of fear of heights may have helped his survival. After that happened, I went to the bookstore and looked up every book on bipolar to help his parents. The one book was from a pharmacological doctor who worked at Boston Hospital. He stated, based on his research, many mental problems start at age 18. Interestingly, my younger sister was diagnosed schizophrenic at 18 and also had suicidal thoughts. The doctor found, based on his research, that the human brain is made primarily of essential fatty acids and that those fats come from fish. In some people, they have an enzyme that can turn flaxseed oil into EFAs. Many people, though, don't have that and come from a genetic history of eating fish. In contrast, many American teens thrive on hamburgers and French fries. He stated by the time they reach 18 or the end of their growth cycle, the shortage of EFA shows up as numerous mental problems such as bipolar and schizophrenic. I'll stop there for a second. One thing about Ben, he was probably raised on the most healthy diet you can imagine. We ate a lot of fish. We ate a lot of sushi. He really knew how to eat right. And at near the end of his life, he became a Ayurvedic chef type person that made some of the most unusual healthy dishes imaginable. So one thing I would say is Ben's issue wasn't lack of fish or lack of a healthy diet. He had it. In addition, for many years, ground beef was found to contain prions. Prions are specific proteins that act like viruses. They are produced when animals eat their own kind. Cannibals go mad from these prions, and that's why it's called mad cow disease. Years ago, it was discovered ground-up cows were fed to cow feed. This is why Canada and other countries like Japan prevented the import of ground beef. Personally, I have not eaten ground beef or a hamburger since 1993. I know something about this, having worked in 4 pharmaceuticals as a consultant. And the guy knows. The pharmaceuticals were fined $28 billion for the opioid crisis. Over 500,000 people died from it. Now, as an after effect, more people are dying from fentanyl overdoses than COVID-19, as brought in your last show. The pharmaceuticals are an $800 billion business on their way to making trillions of dollars. A fact. The largest lobby in Congress is a $40 billion pharmaceutical lobby which regularly contributes to political campaigns. In doing research, I found, for example, that House Speaker received approximately $10 million a year or $150 million in 15 years of campaign contributions. So who do these people fight for? You or the firms that pay them? Serotonin and dopamine. Years ago, Psychology Today magazine had an article on suicides and 2 happiness chemicals in the human brain, serotonin and dopamine. Dopamine, it stated, is the pleasure chemical released with any addiction from alcohol, drugs, etc. They stated that's why drugs have been called dope. Also, you develop a tolerance for dopamine and need more and more to get the same level of pleasure or happiness. The failure of dopamine-led addictions to being true happiness has led some to take their own life. Serotonin is the happiness hormone. It stated religious people and those with well-being have higher serotonin levels. David, your involvement in helping others must bring you high levels of serotonin. Exercise. Regular exercise can have mood-boosting effects. A healthy diet, foods that can increase serotonin levels include eggs, cheese, turkey, nuts, salmon, tofu, and pineapple. Praying and meditating can help relieve stress and promote a positive outlook on life, which can greatly boost serotonin levels. This is why your statement at the end of your show, do something good and help someone, is very important. It's as Jesus said, there's more happiness in giving than receiving. Bingo. Serotonin is a hormone that helps to stabilize moods, regulate feelings of well-being and happiness, regulate anxiety, and control sleep. Vitamin D affects serotonin, also protects against COVID-19. My friend's brother took his life while taking Prozac. Some doctors give Prozac to cure depression, but it can have an opposite effect. It can lead to suicide caused by too little serotonin. Thus, the serotonin has to be monitored. Conclusion. My friend's brother-in-law said at the funeral, "No one is to blame for this. This was an imbalance," end of quotes. Yes, so with Ben. We all suffer from the imperfection brought on by Adam and Eve's decision to rebel against God. We all face the same end in this world, death, without the help of Jesus Christ. Death as pronounced by God in the book of Genesis, for sin is a curse and not a gateway to happiness. Jesus Christ erases that sin. Some people's wrong thinking may contribute to suicide, where they falsely reason it's a better way out or a happier choice. This is why programs like yours are important, as you truly try to educate people. May Jehovah God and His Son Jesus bless you in your continued efforts to help mankind. Thank you. Now I've got to say this. To me, that was an unbelievable email, so thank you. But I put in here some notes. Several paragraphs in this letter were redacted because the video would have been struck if I left them in and read them. And they dealt with facts associated with the vaccine. It's not that I doubt that this person was 100% right in what they said. I just know it would get me struck, and I can't do that. But the meaning behind the letter was really good, and I appreciate it. Hey Dave, I live in Colorado, and we've met briefly at the post office. In short, I'm a huge outdoor guy, fly fishing, prolific bird and big game hunter, and I'm a big fan of your pursuit for truth in all the unresolved National Forest missing cases. I have my own hypothesis, but I digress. I wanted to thank and encourage you on your special edition July 30th video. I think you're in Montana when filming it. I'm guessing this might have been a big decision for whether or not to depart from your normal platform and lay this on the table. In short, kudos, my friend. This is what true patriotism looks like. Also, you referenced evil, which infers you are probably a Christ follower. Yes. I love your heart and courage. If we had more stand-up people like you in our country, it wouldn't be where it is today. Dire straits and serious trouble. Thank you, David, for doing this. Chin up and into the wind. Fight the good fight. Never hesitate to give a call if you need any help or just to visit. Camaraderie. Yeah, thanks. You know, I met a lot of great people over the time. A lot of people who just walked up and started engaging me, and I'm always stunned that anybody's watching. When you do these videos, heck, Huck's not even watching. She's asleep. So it's just me staring into the camera talking. So thanks for saying hi. Next letter. Hey Dave, I'm watching the comments you read today. Lost shoes and socks, which is a common trait when the missing are found and dead. I would propose a theory. Sadh Guru and many other gurus have said that if one wants to achieve Mahasamadhi, that is, leaving one's body permanently by one's own will, such as Sadhu Guru's wife, it is necessary to take off jewelry and bangles, etc. Because a spirit soul is energy. It may be necessary to remove shoes and socks in order to remove one's soul from the body, because it will not simply separate on its own without some trauma like a bullet or a stabbing. Suppose these beings who take souls are doing it for some purpose not known to us, and they do not want to kill the body. They could separate the soul easier from the body with the shoes and socks off instead of killing the frame body. What if these people who go missing are sent here to engage as soul placed in the body for some activity or purpose and later are taken back without molesting the body? Their mission would be done, and they are to return to their original eternal form, and the body is discarded, leaving the families to believe they lost a loved one, when in reality, they lost no one, because that person all along was sent here on a mission and fulfilled that mission. We've talked about this before. And in a lot of ways, I think Ben felt that way. Kind of accomplished what he wanted to accomplish. Didn't like the way the world was going. Didn't feel like he was in the right place. Back to the letter. If, on the other hand, these bodies were mangled and mutilated as evidence of hate crimes, anger, etc., then we might surmise that the same devil worshippers were committing these crimes. Until we can accept the fact that we are beings of light first and are eternal, thus cannot fear anything, we will live in this quandary forever, guessing the cause of the missing. Yes. Which brings up, and I can have these conversations with some people, others I can't, but reincarnation. If you're a good person, if you live to that higher cause, then maybe you'll be reincarnated at your level or higher. If you're a bad person, if you haven't done good things to the will of the people, maybe you're reincarnated as a lower level life, maybe a mouse. Just saying. Reincarnation's an interesting thing. I've talked to you about it in past videos where Leslie Kean has wrote a book about people who have been apparently lived another life and came back and talked about it. I mean, just young kids talked about a life they lived before and knew facts that there's no way that young boy would have known because he couldn't even have read. Interesting topic in my world. I'm on the fence about whether you are reincarnated or not. Dave, greetings from India. In the year before Ben took his life, he went to India for a month. And it scared the heck out of me every day he was gone. Because a psychiatrist had told us that sometimes bipolar people just check out and wander, and you can't find them. Now, Ben was pretty responsible, and an agreement we had is that if I called him and he wasn't available, he'd call me back at his first convenient. And we never played games with the phone like that. You know, I'm not going to call him for a couple of days. I'm not going to call him. He would call. And in India, he got a special cell plan so we could talk. And he had an interesting time there. He met some really, really good people in the Krishna world that showed him around. So anyhow, hello Dave. Hope this finds you well, and I don't just appreciate your immensely organized work, but I think the entire UFO research community has to be grateful to you for chalking out precise methods of reporting, documenting anything paranormal. They must try to follow the same. Because we live in a world where we like to accept and believe what helps us get by our everyday lives without disturbance. Paranormal, like Bigfoot researcher Bobo Fay mentioned in an interview with you, paranormal could be pre-normal because we are only paying attention now and have technology that can pick up anything out of our comfortable frame of reference. 100 years ago, it might have been going on, but nobody knew, and no one knew how to measure it. Dave, you have such a huge following because you don't point them to look in a direction or to speculate. I live in India, and all of my life, though my father has lived in the U.S. and traveled extensively in the past, he introduced the Predator movie to me when I was 12, and I didn't sleep or go anywhere alone or near the tree line for weeks after that because deep down I felt this almost feels too good to be just good screenwriting. Bipedal, intelligent, non-gray alien deciding to hunt cloaked and for fun? How did they come up with that? Yeah, how did they? I came across the missing 411 phenomena after watching a lot of Skinwalker Ranch videos and haven't watched anything else since. I'm glad I did because I was at the lowest point in my life where I couldn't escape the hell I was in. I now feel I've found a direction because there are bigger things in play here. Yes, there are. Everyone agrees we have a problem because, like you said, what is causing it seems to outlive the human lifespan. Imagine that it can manipulate weather at will. What is scarier than that? What if we can't measure or study or ever capture whatever is causing this? Not in 100 years or so years. Thankfully, my son can read your books in the future so as to understand something global and covert is happening. And he needs to always be on the lookout, and he can pass down the books to his kids. So Dave, I have 3 things I want to tell you. 1, if this is a global phenomenon, we need to look at the local news and first-hand accounts. In my country, there is a reporting problem. They don't report anything that might paint them crazy. So social media posts and forums like Reddit and Quora, if this follows a pattern, a good place to start would be regions with supposed Bigfoot sightings. That would be northeastern India, close to the Himalayas. The Mizo people call Bigfoot there Mandi Burung, and there are tribal people who lived there a long time ago. I personally do not believe it's a Bigfoot taking them because there are reports of territorial stone pelting, chasing, and scaring. It could have killed, but it didn't. But you mentioned a lot of Bigfoot sightings coincide with 411 clusters. I did. What if you haven't mentioned it already, what if I'm sure you thought about it long before us if something is hitchhiking the portals Bigfoot uses to move around, or Bigfoot is using the portals those beings use? What is the future of humanity? Why are they so interested in humans? How much more delusional are a majority of us to be, wasting so much time chasing after things that don't matter? How many more are we going to lose? Good questions. Now, hitchhiking on the back of the Bigfoot through the portals. Well, You could say that about Skinwalker Ranch. If you think about all of the strange creatures that have been documented at that ranch, something's following them in. Number 2, I'm an English teacher and sent some missing 411 videos as a listening and comprehension exercise to my students. One who lives in the foothills of the Himalayan mountain range recounted a tale of a missing without a trace mountaineer who went climbing with his friends and had his rope cut and nobody was ever found. I'd like to note, SAR isn't as efficient unless military is involved in India. Recently, camping has been banned in many parts of the Himachal Pradesh with no official reason stated. Again, I do my best to get a hold of the witness and email again if this story checks out to be 100% true. I'd like to hear more about that. There's a story I have on Mount Rainier, very similar to that, where probably the most experienced person to ever summit Mount Rainier dozens of times just disappeared on the side of the mountain on a dangling rope. He didn't fall. Nobody knows what happened to him. Number 3, the Tamil people in the South have a long oral tradition and are known for noun naming because of a reason going back thousands of years. Often rural folk warned against late evening travel or traveling in the woods unprepared about strange beings called Kathu and Karupu. Kathu meaning wind and Karupu meaning black. They allegedly looked like black smoke. They were also notorious for scaring or kidnapping babies, mostly killing for maiming travelers. I'd like to note there is no overlap in the terms for spirits, ghosts, and demons. My heart goes out to those who have lost their kids. I have a 5-year-old myself, and I've often had dreams of losing him and screaming for him in all areas of the wilderness. My special prayers to everyone who has lost a child. There's absolutely nothing worse, and particularly those who never knew where they went or what they could have done better. Like you mentioned, I'd like to remind everyone who hears this to keep a close eye on your children everywhere. And all the time, no matter where in the world you live, educate them about the dangers of the outside world and remind teachers and secondary caretakers that they have a responsibility to keep your kids safe. They are too young to have their lives snatched from them. Very grateful to you, Dave. Well, I'm very grateful to you for that engaging email. Thank you. As I've stated many times, and I'll remind people, that when you go to a national park, even a county park, state park, it's not a safe playland. You keep your kids close to you. You don't lose sight of them. You don't let them run around like crazy people. There's a lot of bad things that happen at these places. And there's a lot of bad people that go to those parks to commit crimes. There's been articles just recently that the National Park Service has said that they don't have enough park rangers and law enforcement personnel to keep the park safe anymore. Just the facts. Next letter. Hey Dave, in 2017 I stumbled on a Coast to Coast YouTube channel regarding missing person topic hosted by George Norrie. It was a phenomenon I didn't know much about at the time. I listened to you and George discuss certain missing persons cases and their unusual characteristics. The more I listened, the more I was glued to 411. Since then, I have been following your work, read your books, watched your movies, and joined in on YouTube channel. Glad to be part of the village. Thanks for being here. It was September 97. 2 buddies and I decided to go on an afternoon hike at around 2 p.m. 3 of us packed some light snacks and a bottled water. Back then, we didn't have any cell phones, just pagers. It was an easy 4-mile hike. Since we have done this trail countless times in the past, we thought it was nothing new or different. Boy, were we wrong. It's different because we started later in the afternoon, which means shorter daylight time. What happened was we got too deep into the forest and we never made it out in time as it got dark fast. We stayed near the creek and stayed close together overnight. We didn't have a flashlight, matches, or lighter, not enough snacks, and we sipped on whatever water we had left. The mosquitoes were a bitch because we were getting bitten overnight. We know we weren't lost because the creek is our guide back to the main trail. We patiently waited till daybreak and then hiked out. As the three of us kept ourselves calm in the pitch-black forest, we were hoping not to cross paths with night marchers or wild boar or even worse. Bad weather because where we were can have a sudden flash flood, and it was impossible to get to higher ground in the dark. Now, here's where it gets strange. At about 1 a.m., I looked up and noticed a bright white light in the sky. There were no clouds over us. At first, I thought it was a full moon, but for some reason, the white light tended to shine even brighter than someone upped the dimmer switch on high to shine like stadium lights. Then another bright light appeared in the sky. The more lights. There were about 4 or 5 of those stadium lights floating around in the sky near each other. These lights were not searching for us because there was no sound of a plane or a helicopter. These lights were slowly moving in their own formations. They were spread out, then close in like a football huddle, then spread out again, and then moved in a straight line and then form a square. Within about 10 or 15 minutes, the light slowly faded away. It was pretty amazing. The whole time this was going on, I tried to get my 2 buddies to look up into the sky, but neither of them didn't look, and I don't know because they're too tired or too afraid. I don't know. The next day, I checked on my buddies on their recovery and well-being. When asked if they remember seeing or hearing anything strange or weird during our time in the forest, they both don't recall ever experiencing anything out of the ordinary. To this day, I find it hard to believe them. Whatever it was up in the sky that night, brightly shining and moving about, was probably meant for me to see. Keep up the great work. Your time and effort for what you do is phenomenal. So just the other night, I was out with Joe Hauser and his wife, and Angie and I were at dinner, and we were talking about this exact issue. And that is a group of people standing around, say, looking at a lake. And one person sees something come out of the lake and fly into the sky. And then they look stunned and bewildered and speechless. And everyone asks them what's wrong. And they explain that they saw this. And then the other people around them think they're nuts because they were all looking at the same place, but only one person saw it. And what we were talking about is it's almost as though this happens a lot. There was a story in Livermore, California. Livermore is maybe 30 miles, 35 miles southeast of San Francisco. Suburb city, really nice. And this person was stopped on the side of the freeway looking into Livermore City. And he saw this perfect shaped UFO. It's like a standard flying saucer hovering in the air, not moving, not making a sound. It was big, 50, 70 feet across. And the person stood by his car and watched it for 20 minutes. He said then he looked down at his car, started to fix his tire again, looked up, and it was gone. And it was a MUFON report. And he was looking for other people to substantiate what he saw because he thought, with the thousands of people that went up and down the freeway during that time, somebody had to have seen this. And nobody ever did. So, some reason, one person, 2 people may be meant to see something, and you were not meant if you're in that group. So, doesn't surprise me at all. Now, I'm going to talk about some cases here. The first case involves an incident out of Maine. And it's an older case. And I can't tell you how many times, hundreds of times, these same circumstances have played out on other missing persons cases. William Vigneault, 29 years, missing December 3rd, 1893. Now, the black line on the right, well, the black line on over here, That's the New Hampshire border with Maine. And then the red dot is a location where William went to. It's called Puffer's Pond. He was a trapper from Sherbrooke, Canada. He was staying in Maine. And he told his friends he was going to take a 2-hour trip to check his lines. Now, trappers are kind of quiet people. They don't like to tell others where they're trapping. They don't like to give up their spots. Kind of like fishermen. They're kind of a little bit secretive. Well, William was secretive. Puffer's Pond, pretty good sized pond. Well, he went out there, said he'd be back in 2 hours. Didn't come back. And his friends called law enforcement. They called the fire department. And then they called everybody in the town, asking them for help to go out and find him. Well, the next day, the high school told all the boys in the school to go help with the search. They didn't have to come into school. Well, if you're a boy, what would you want to do? Walk around the woods or go to high school? My vote would have been, send me out. And they did. So they thought they found a spot on Puffer's Pond that appeared to be a place where maybe he had put down some equipment, or the ice wasn't broken, but it just didn't look right. And they thought, well, maybe he fell in here. So right from the first day, they put a series of firemen on that spot. And for the next 5 days, they dragged the pond thinking, well, let's cover our bases to make sure that William didn't fall in. And for the other days, there was a massive search, a grid search of the area around Puffer's Pond. They didn't find anything. So everyone went home. People in Sherbrooke were notified that Michael disappeared. And life went on. Well, then 5 months later, April 28th, 1894, 2 boys were fishing in Puffer's Pond. And they hooked something. They pulled it in. And it was William Vigneault. The body was found at the exact location where they were dragging the pond. People were dumbfounded. In fact, the articles even stated that it was the exact place that they were dragging. The body was brought in, and the coroner decided not to do an inquest. So there were no tracks in the area. It had rained and snowed. It was around water. But this exact scenario plays out many, many times. Now, do I believe that search and rescue is so inept that these people aren't found? No. I don't believe that. Do I believe that something unusual has happened? Well, I've talked about this scenario in Missing 411, A Sobering Coincidence. And a New York detective that said, well, the bodies that we found in water weren't in water the entire time that the person was missing. So my question is, in William's case, did his body show the same conditions that it had been in the water for 4 or 5 months? And obviously they didn't have this technology back in the 1800s that they have today. But if that was the case today, I'd want to know, well, what was the chemical analysis of what was in the body? Was there GHB associated with this? William was alone, said he'd be back in 2 hours, didn't return. So it's one of those cases where point of separation, water, no tracks, previously searched. What happens? What is going on? And again, why does this never happen when people are watching? Just saying. So that's the first case. That was in Maine. And again, Just below the red dot is Newport, Maine. Kind of get a feeling for where this was located. Okay. Now, next case is an incident that happens in the state of Washington. One of the criteria points, profile points we look at, is people who have disabilities or injuries. And it seems as though those people are available or have the ability to evade being found, which is contrary to everything you'd think. Well, if the person had a, let's just say, a broken leg, how could they not be found? Well, in this incident, an individual by the name of I.R. Snyder, went missing November 1st, 1937, from an area near Rogers Pass, Washington. Now, where is that, they ask? So, red dot is Rogers. The line is the Idaho border. And I put a straight line from where Rogers Pass is to Priest Lake. Why? Because if you're a regular here, I talked to you about a berry picker who disappeared there. But there's also people that have disappeared in this area as well of Idaho. And a big whodunit on this map about many cases that would fit on here. So, IR. Friend hadn't heard from him for a while. So he went over to his house up high in the mountains. Went up to the house, door's unlocked, walks in, calls his name, looks around. Nothing's going on. Thinks, well, that's kind of weird. And notices that the canes are gone. Canes. IR was seriously disabled. He used 2 canes to get around. And his friend called the sheriff. The sheriff responds. And there was a CCC camp nearby. And he got 50 men out the next day. And for 3 days, 50 men searched in a grid pattern around IR's residence near Rogers Pass. There were no tracks. It had snowed up in that area. They found no evidence of IR anywhere. They contacted his friends and his relatives that lived in the homes and of the area. Nobody had heard from him. Nobody had visited him. There was some question, well, maybe he took a ride with somebody. But they contacted everybody he knew. Again, there was no evidence of a crime, abduction, no theft. The final thought was, well, it was doubtful that he got in and take a ride with anybody. And the more important point is that even though he was seriously disabled, the comments were he was not senile and he had no dementia. I.R. Snyder, 70 years old, disappeared November 1st, 1937, Rogers Pass, Washington. Where is he? Where did he go? All his suitcases were in his house. He hadn't left on a trip. What happened? Yeah. What happened? So the next case involves an incident out of Alaska. And this one's a pretty weird case. It involves a man named John Short. John's picture. 65 years old. Went missing June 15th, 1976 from a little city called Candle, Alaska, on the Seaward Peninsula. It's on the west bank of the Kywok River. It's a mining city. Right where the river meets Candle Creek is where they established the city. In 1910, it first appeared on the U.S. Census as an unincorporated city. By 1960, it was nearly abandoned, and right now there's just 103 people that call it home. Not a real big place. Now, at the bottom is Nome, where my finger is, and at the top is Candle, and that's the Seaward Peninsula. And just out here, just about right here on the map, that's Russia. So he disappeared up in here, very close to open bodies of water. Get a little closer for you. Now John, super smart man. He had hiked all over Alaska for the previous 20 years of his life. He was very much the outdoorsman. And by profession, he was a surveyor. And he was surveying mines, gold mines. Well, in this instance, he was going to hike 10 to 12 miles into an area near Candle, Alaska, to do some work on a gold mine. Everybody said that he was so healthy he'd do that amount of distance in one day. Well, they knew he was going in June 15th, but they weren't sure when he was coming out. He was a tough, rugged outdoorsman. He owned a company called Cobastral, Surveyors, and that was in Cape Coral, Florida, where he lived with his wife. And he had a partner in the surveying business in Fairbanks called Steve Miskoff. And Steve wasn't sure when his partner was coming out either. But after 2 weeks, they all knew he should have come out because he didn't have the supplies to live past that point. So Miskoff called the Alaska State Troopers. And they did an air, water, and land and canine search. They found nothing. This was no small-time effort. They searched for 6 weeks. In November of 1976, they summoned a coroner's jury to look into the case. And about this time, his son had already taken over the surveying business in Florida at the request of the mom. During the initial search for John, it had rained on the SAR, search and rescue. They didn't find any tracks on the path he was supposedly going in on. They didn't find any of his equipment. They didn't find his backpack. They didn't find any evidence of animal predation. They didn't find anything. So what happened to John Short? Middle of nowhere, Alaska. I.R. Snyder on a lonely gap pass, Rogers Pass from Washington. Where's these people going? Now, the last case. Last case is the most unusual of them all. And when I first did the research on this, I was stunned with what I found. Yeah, I could say that. I don't say that about many cases, but a young man named Lynn Simmons, 24 years old. Now pay close attention because we're going to talk a little bit about Skinwalker Ranch on this case. Yes. Now, Lynn was employed by the U.S. Geological Survey. He went missing September 4th, 1940, about 2 p.m. He was from Salt Lake City, where he was born and raised. His dad was a physical ed teacher for the Salt Lake School District, and his brother was a coach for them. He got a job as a U.S. land surveyor on a special team, and they were working near Lamotte Peak, Utah. 12,720 foot peak, much of the peak far above timberline. Now, pay close attention to this. I've stated before I don't have any cases right around Skinwalker Ranch, but 40 miles away, I do have this one. And this one is a good one. Now, 40 miles is a hop, skip, and a jump for anyone, the way the crow flies. So, well within a cluster zone if I was to make one here. So, Lamotte Peak isn't far from the Wyoming border. And the survey team had established a camp at the bottom of the peak. Now, what does Lamotte Peak look like, you ask? Well, I've got that. This is it. It's a beautiful place. Lots of water around the base. And Lynn was returning to camp with his team. And he was last in line at about 2 o'clock. on September 4th. Why is last in line important? Followers know that things happen to the person who's last in line. There was an article written about my work years ago in the Huffington Post, and its title of it was "Don't Be Last in Line." So they're about a mile out from camp, and one of the people on the team looks back and they see Lynn. They wave. He's still walking down. He waves back. So they know he's okay. And they go back to camp. They reported that they were about a mile out at that point. A mile out, okay? So they wait. They figure, hey, maybe he's doing something else, but their job was done for the day. The next morning they wake up, they call the U.S. Forest Service, and they call the Summit County Sheriff. And a sheriff named Frank Naramore takes over. He contacts U.S. Forest Service rangers in Wyoming to start moving down. And they came into the area, and they got CCC workers immediately from a camp not far away, 25 of them. And the forest rangers and the sheriff worked together to set up grid patterns to search the gap that they were walking through on Lamotte Peak. On September 8th, they had 80 men there searching. On September 12th, they got 50 more. On the 15th, they got 100 more. At any one time, they had 300 men searching for Lynn Simmons. This is when it gets odd. I gotta say, this is weird. On September 15th, there's an article in the paper saying that the Department of the Interior, and that's who USGS was working for at the time, sent 5 criminal investigators to the camp. They sent 5 from Colorado, and they sent 2 additional ones from Utah. A total of 7. And there wasn't any innuendo of criminal misconduct by the USGS team. But they couldn't understand is how Lynn could disappear above tree level when there was nothing around. No place to hide. Now on September 21st, on the 15th, when the Department of Interior investigators arrived, they gave a message from Washington, D.C. that said that the search is going to continue until they find Lynn Simmons or until snow inundates and has to close it down. And the theory was that nobody was believing that he could just disappear. And if he did disappear, then everyone was starting to think, well, maybe he just went home. But they had daily contact with his family, and his family said, no, Lynn would be the first people that we contacted. And he didn't contact us. So that was the ongoing theory. So 6 to 8 inches of snow dropped on September 21st, 1940. And the search and rescue was shut down. Washington heard about it and said, that's not enough. Go back out there. October 7th, search and rescue starts again. Investigators are there again. And they start blowing up beaver dams in the river, small river and creeks that are in the area. Again, the orders are to stay until he's found. 300 men were still showing up to search. On October 31st, terminated. Search was over. Lynn wasn't found. There was no contact with his parents. They found no tracks. Found none of his clothing. Lynn Simmons, 24-year-old, brilliant kid, gone. Last in line, weather issues, lots of boulders, lots of water. Where could he go? And that is always the million-dollar question on these cases. Now, he worked for the government. This is the first time I ever heard of investigators arriving on a missing persons case back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Never heard of it before. But they knew something unusual happened. They knew it. Now, there was never anything in the paper about alleging a crime had taken place. It was just that they could not explain why he wasn't being found. So, if you looked at the map here, and I'll open it up again for you. So, on this is the peak, Skinwalker Ranch, 40 air miles. Cover that pretty darn quick. Now, I'm not saying it's related, but since other people in the government have said it's related, I guess I could say it now. Now, the people in the government won't talk to me and won't tell me why my own work is maybe even related to this. I'd love to talk to them, understand it. I think I can make the connections myself, but I'd rather have them do it for me, just to validate it. But that's the Skinwalker Ranch connection to that case. Now, I try not to overemphasize certain things, but to move 7 investigators across a state into other states, up into the mountains, it's a huge effort. Now, I don't know what happened to Lynn Simmons, but something very strange did. Very strange. Just like what happened to I.R. Snyder. Well, he wasn't a government employee, so the resources weren't given. And John Short wasn't a government employee, so you just get the bare necessity, the bare search, which is really nothing. That's why I encourage all of you to go out and become search and rescue professionals. Take the classes. We need good people out there. And in this day and age where there's a lot of good reasons to volunteer for certain things, nothing's better than search and rescue in my mind. You're out there in the beautiful wilderness. You're doing something that's great for humanity. You know that there's a family out there rooting for you to find their loved one. Search and rescue is usually ran by the local sheriff. Call the sheriff, talk to the search and rescue coordinator, and ask them how you can be involved. Every county has one. And then I always talk about doing something nice for somebody, whatever that may be. Commit yourself to doing something that is outside your comfort zone. Just like the letter said earlier, it'll make you feel better about yourself. And that's always a good thing. Now, since I've been sitting here and doing this segment, Huck has not moved an inch. Oh, maybe she did an inch. She laid down, closed her eyes, and she has been really quiet. So I'll see if I can get up without disturbing her immensely and give one last shot of her. But she just, I think, woke up. She's looking at me right now with those big eyes of hers. There she is. She's going to be a big dog. Anyhow, friends, thanks for being here. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, forward it on to your friends, and remember, the village appreciates you and all the comments you've made. It's all good. And be safe, carry a personal locator beacon, and check the weather before you go out hiking. Have a great week. Paulides out.